So welcome to lecture 4 in Kuzari. For those of you that are here and those of you watching the recordings, I appreciate very much that your interest and participation. And if anyone wants to email me questions or issues, I'll put if I put my email on this screen, does it pop up? I'll do it now, and then so people can so it's in the chat.
In the chat, yeah.
I did just put it in the chat. All right. So yeah, you can questions, comments, etc. So we are in. It's divided. The book is divided into several essays, or ma'amarim in the Hebrew versions, and we're in the middle of the first essay, and they're all divided into each paragraph. It has a number. So we finished paragraph 10 last time, so we're about to read paragraph number 11, or Yud Aleph in the alphanumeric Hebrew version. So I wanted to. So the Kuzari, the person we're calling the Kuzari, that's the king of the Khazars, who is trying to find out what he has. He had this dream. He knows he has the right intentions. He wants to do the right thing, but he doesn't know what the right ma'asim are. What are the right actions? How is he supposed to live his life to satisfy God? Right. There's a couple of notes that I want to make before. So he talked to the philosopher. He wasn't satisfied with the philosopher mostly because the philosopher didn't seem to give him an answer as to what he should do. All right, so now how do I live, right? And then he asked the Muslim and the Christian, right? And both of them didn't satisfy him. I want to point out a few things. First of all, unlike an argument that you or I might have today about religion, right? If you or I were going to meet somebody on the street that has questions about religion, almost certainly he or she would be entertaining the possibility that the religion is completely not true and there is no God, period, right? In other words, they'd be entertaining an atheist position. There is no one promoting the atheist position, right? In here, right? So the assumption that there is a God is taken as a given by the king himself, right? The king himself was trying to appease the gods, so to speak, in his life. So we should never take the argument that the Kuzari, that the Chacham, that the Jew is about to give as an argument against atheism. So if you're looking for an argument to prove that the God is true, then the Kuzari is really the wrong book, right? And we have to understand that whenever now the Rambam or Nevuchim might have been the right book, right? Because Rambam was making those arguments, and he was quoting Aristotle, who tried to, who proved, at least in Aristotelian thought, that there is a prime mover, etc. But the Kuzari is not entertaining that argument. He's arguing against the other systems, right? It's important to remember that. And I'm saying this because in my lifetime, every time I learned the Kuzari, I think the rabbis that taught it to me over the years always misunderstood this, and I didn't get it until recently. They use the Kuzari as the proofs and stuff that we're going to encounter as we go through the book, as if it proves God or proves religion, but it's not. It was never meant that way. It was meant to prove the path of Judaism as being the right path to worship God, but God's existence is a given. That's one point I want to make. I come back to that as over the next many lectures, as issues pop up, and you'll understand why I make that point. Another thing is that I want to look back at the language that was used when the Kuzari asked the philosopher. When he asked the philosopher, he asked him al emunato. He asked him regarding his faith. If you look back, that was in item number 1, right? About his faith or about his belief system, right? He didn't. But then the problem right. So in other words, what was the assumption that the Kuzari had? The Kuzari thought that if the philosopher has a faith, then I'll understand from that faith system, whatever his belief system is, why he chooses path A in life, right? Why he chooses to do this, whatever it is that he does, right? He ended up not being satisfied. And then he turned to both the Notzri, the Christian, and the Muslim, and he asked them specifically, Al emunato vi al ma'asehu, right? That's in the Hebrew translation that I have, and you can look in the English versions that you may have. He asked them, he was more specific. He says, no, I want to know about your faith. I want to know about your belief system. And I want to know about why that belief system leads to that way of living that you choose. Why do you live like a Christian? Why do you do the things that Christians do? Why do you do the things that Muslims do? Why do you choose that path in life? He didn't get satisfactory answers. He got their basic faith, but he didn't get the answer that he wanted. He stopped at the faith, right? They gave him the faith, and he questioned the whole faith of both of them, right? And you can go back to those questions if you want to. I'm not going to go into the details. Now, it's important that when we see he turns to the Jew and he asks the Jew, Al Vishal Oto Le'emunato, right? Just about his faith. Because now he's already, you know what? I'm getting stuck in the faith and belief system area. I know what I ultimately want to know is Ma'aseu, his actions, right? But first, let me figure out, like, what's the belief system? Is the Jew going to give me the same kind of thing that these other guys gave me? So I know last lecture we delved into the issue of how these were faith systems, but not systems of action. They didn't tell him what to do, whereas Judaism is much more of a way of life, and that's something that we emphasize. It's going to take a while for him to get there, because the Chaver, which is what Rabbi Yehuda Levi calls the Jewish Chacham, he calls him a Chaver. That goes back to the language in the time of the Talmud, where a Chaver meant a member of the rabbinic club, right? A person who chose to live and keep halacha, so on, was called a Chaver. So he's using that language. He's calling him a Chaver. So now we're going to look at ayat 11, which, if you're following in the in this version, that's the Korobkin version. It's on page 66. But if you look in Essay 1 or Ma'amar Rishon, item number 11 or Yud Aleph, you'll pick up where I am, and then follow in whatever translation you have. So what's your belief system? Okay. So Amarlo, so the Chaver answers him as follows. Ani ma'amin belohei Avraham Yitzchak v'Yisrael. I believe, in other words, you ask me what my belief is. I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, right? So in other words, he right away establishes a relationship. And I use the word relationship because that's the key. That's really the key to understanding this entire speech that the Chaver is about to embark on and give us. And this entire conversation has to be understood that way. In other words, I believe in the God that has a relationship with my forefathers, right? Because what did he do for us? He took the people of Israel out of Egypt with great signs and wonders. And he gave us, he sustained us in the desert. Eventually gave them the land of Israel after he passed them through the sea, right? And crossing the Jordan River. Benisim also with great signs and great wonders. V'sholach at Moshe, and then, so he did all these things for us, and he sent it to us, Moshe im Torah, so with his teachings, with his Torah. V'achrav, and after Moshe, he sent alfei neviim, thousands of prophets, she'ishru et Torah, so that supported and expanded upon the Torah that Moshe had gave us. V'havtochat sochar l'shomer, also with the promise that if you keep the Torah, you will be rewarded, things will be good. And he warned us that we would be punished if we did not keep the Torah. So we believe in all of those things that are in the Torah, and it's a long subject. So there's a few key things that I want you to zero in on. Number one, and this differentiates the Yehuda Levi from Rambam in a very clear way, right, is the emphasis on our relationship between us and God being based on miracles, right? But he doesn't, even Rabbi Yehuda Levi, it would be wrong to think that Rabbi Yehuda Levi is basing it on the fact that these things were necessarily miraculous so to speak, being that they're out of the realm of normal nature. It's more of God did these things for us, right? And he gave us these things in order to give us a task to fulfill, and therefore we fulfill this task. So even though the Chaver was not asked to tell him about the ma'asim, to tell him about the actions, the Chaver, who was probably present during the first parts of the conversation, sensed and realized that the Kuzari is looking for something else, right? He doesn't just want to know, right, what our philosophy is. He wants to know why we do what we do, right? So he tells him, God did so many things for us as a people, right? We were once in Egypt. We were freed from Egypt. We wandered through the desert and we made it through and we survived. We got to Israel and we got there and he gave us a land and everything. And he expects something from us. So this is a very, and what does he expect us to do? That's what the Torah is. And that's why we do what we do. So now, Amar al Kuzari, I'm in item number 12. So the Kuzari says, oh no, right? I had already decided not to ask the Jew. Their traditions are their traditions are lost, right? They've been bounced around and persecuted so much. They don't even know what they believe anymore, right? And they're all of their ideas are all messed up. They don't even have any good traits left in them, right? No, he's parroting traditional anti-Semitic ideas, right? Which one would expect of a king that's not exposed to Jews in those days. He'd say, yeah, there's nothing good about them. Madua lo amarta, you should have answered me. Why didn't you answer me the following? Ata Yudi, Jewish guy. Shatamamin bebore olam, right? He was expecting him to give a philosophical discourse. I believe in the creator of the world, Misadro Manigo, who set up the world the way he is, and he runs the world. Misha bara oscha v'zan oscha, right? And he created you, and he gives you everything you need to live. And all kinds of descriptions of God, I expected you to say. And then Asher Tanat called Baldas, because that's what every other religious person says. They all say, I believe in the creator of the universe, right? And because all of those things that God does, he created the world, he made us, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we should go and seek truth and righteousness, so that we should be like God, right? And the problem is so by the way, right, again, you those of us that studied Rambam understand and know that this was more or less, I mean, nothing's exact, right, but to a significant degree, this is kind of how the Rambam understands our obligation to God, right? And but that's not how Rabbi Yehuda Halevi understands it, right? And Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, in the name of the Chaver, is about to answer. But before we see his answer, I just want to emphasize the Kuzari's question. He's saying, right, I expected you to give me a philosophical discourse, right, about the nature of God, how God relates to the world, and because of the way God relates to the world, therefore, this is the right way for us to live. Therefore, I'm supposed to do A, B, and C, right? And that's what I expected. I didn't get it from the other guys because when they started telling me about the nature of God, it didn't make sense, right? One guy tells me how God is part human, is not human, might be human. Another guy tells me about, things about the Quran that I just don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. So on. You can go back to those things. I was expecting you to go start on that path, but give me something that I can sink my teeth into. So, he figures, you Jew, you don't know, all you know, you telling me stories. Yeah, you got out of Egypt and it's stories, right? So what does that do for me, right? It doesn't help me learn how to live. So Amar Chaver. So the Chaver says something, this is a pretty remarkable answer. Masha to Omer, hi hadat ha-hegyonit ha-medinit. I'm reading in the modern Hebrew translation of Michael Schwartz, this one that I showed you guys before. So the best translation in English I have of the modern Hebrew, and we're in item 13, is those are political and religious ideas, right, that you're asking me, right? And that it's true that when one is ma'ayin, one does research, one does scientific study or logical analysis, right? Then one starts thinking about these things. So what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is saying here as the Chaver is that sure, yeah, there's a lot we can talk about that if you want to. We can speculate about the nature of God and the nature of how we're supposed to live and all that, and those are fine subjects, right? But kalulim basfekos rabim, there's all sorts of doubts. Nobody really knows the answers to all the questions. I mean, think about how much we studied more Nevuchim to guiding the perplexed, and we're still perplexed about most of the issues that he discussed, right? So go ask the philosophers, and they can tell you all kinds of ideas, right? But they're never going to agree on one particular way that we're supposed to live, right? They won't actually agree on one opinion about how God works and how the world works, etc. Sometimes they can prove their ideas. Some of them that convince them, but might that might be convincing. That some of them there might not be, that be less convincing. But we can never prove all those ideas. So what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi here is saying through the Chaver is really a very interesting answer. He's not. I've heard this in lectures before, many years ago in yeshiva, that he's really just brushing away philosophy, that it's just stupid. You ask these questions, nobody really knows if it's true, not true. That's not what he's doing here. What he's doing here, he's saying it's fine. We can have that discussion. If you want to sit and talk philosophy, we can talk philosophy, right? But do you really want to know why we live the way we live and why we keep the Torah? Philosophy is not the answer to that question. Because, and we can debate it, and we can have interesting subjects. We can go on for hours and hours and hours and argue back and forth, and it's all wonderful. And we feel really nice and intelligent when we finish our argument. But at the end of the story, we still will be left with perplexities. We still will be left with things we don't know, we can't prove, might be true, might not be true. So Amra Kuzari, so the Kuzari said, so you're asking me a question, and you wanted me to give a certain type of answer, but that type of answer would have led you nowhere. Which, in fact, you got nowhere. You asked those questions of 3 philosophers, and where did you get? Nowhere. So you want me to tell you something different. So I'm telling you something different. We keep the Torah because we have a relationship with God. God did all of this for us, and he wants us to live a certain way. Okay? So let's hit item number 14. So the Kuzari responds, you know what, Jew? Right? I think I like what you just said. They are much nicer and much better than what all the other guys started off saying. I want you to keep on going, right? So the Kuzari, it realizes that this Jew has a whole different approach, a whole different, way of thinking. So let me hear more. I want to hear a little bit more. So Amar Chaver. So the Chaver said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake in the translation. No, not better than what they had said, but better than the way you had started. In other words, I like what you just said about philosophy, but I still didn't really understand what you meant when you told me about how you believe in the God of Israel who did all these things for you and expects you to keep the Torah. Explain that a little bit more. Tell me more. The Chaver said, no, you misunderstood me. This is in item 15. That is the entire point. That's the proof. The proof that Judaism is the better path than those other paths is the very point that I made. Yes, it is what lights our eyes. In other words, it shows us the right way, right? And it is better than proofs. It's better than philosophical proofs, right? We can argue about philosophical proofs, but we can't argue about our history. We know that we were once slaves in Egypt. We know that we were freed from Egypt. We know that we settled the land of Israel. We know that we have this relationship with God, right? We don't need to debate these things, right? You can debate. This is why anti-Semites, the first thing they like to do is erase our history, right? Because our history is the basis of everything, right? Our special history is what makes us special, right? Right? This relationship, the back and forth we've had with God, both the good things that he's done for us, and unfortunately the punishments that we receive, over history and the generations. But it's that relationship that obligates us to live in a special way, which we call Judaism, right? And you can't separate the two. Omar Kuzari, how is it true that I don't understand what you mean, right? Tell me what you mean, that this is the proof that this is the right path. So Omar HaChaver, and again, this next group of items, from about, I think it's from here until around 25. I'm going to read through them, but they've been terribly misunderstood by a lot of people that teach Kuzari, and I'll bet that if you go online and look at other Kuzari lectures, you'll see people explaining it another way. I mean, if you like their way better, that's fine. You're welcome to like it, but I'm going to teach it my way. Okay. But Omar HaChaver. So the Chaver says like this: Harshei li lahakdim hakdamos. Let me make some introductions. Give you some premises, introductory comments. Right? I see that you don't really respect and you don't really understand what I'm trying to say, and you're making light of my words. So let me give you some examples. Okay. So I do want to make a point here offline, and that is the Kuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, is telling us what we've known and we've learned together, all of us that have been studying together, that there aren't simple 5-second TikTok video answers that can answer the big questions of life. They don't exist. And if you're looking for them, then you might find some random stupid nonsense, but you will not actually find the answers. It takes time. You have to think. You have to use your head, right? And it takes reading, it takes understanding, it takes debate, it takes discussion. And here he's going to use an example to show us that it's the relationship with God is built on him treating us in a special way, and therefore us having to live in a special way. So Amar Kuzari, this is item 18. Go ahead. Tell me, if you really want to explain this to me, tell me your introductions and go for it. So Amar Chaver 19. So the Chaver answers, Lu Nemar Locha ki shalit hodu mu'ula. If I told you that there's a great king in India, and it's worth it for you to consider him great and praise him and exalt him, right? You should give him honor, and describe his wondrous actions, because you know that the people that live in his land are very righteous and special, and they have great traits, and they're very just and honest in their business. Would that mean anything to you? Would that obligate you to go ahead and talk about how great the king is? If I just gave you told you, there's a guy over there, he's great, right? And there's people that are supposedly our leaders today that'll tell you, oh, he's the greatest ever, right? And you're supposed to just believe it because he said so. Well, the Kuzari says, Amar Kuzari, number 20. How could I be obligated to praise and honor this person? Right? I have no idea what the people of India are like, right? Remember, in his time, they knew that India existed. Occasionally there was trade back and forth, but nobody in Europe really knew what India was like, right? Maybe they're great people. Maybe they don't even have a king, right? Right? Or maybe they do have a great king, and that's why they're great. Or maybe they're just great people that have great kings. In other words, bottom line, I don't know anything about India, so how could I? I'm not going to do it just because you told me. So Amar Chaver. So the Chaver then says, "V'ilu hevi l'chosh licho matanos hodios." But let's say his messenger came to you, and he brought you special gifts from India. That it's clearly obvious from the nature of these gifts that these are special gifts that only come from India, and they're amazing things that are incredible, right? Yachad and Migeras, and it's together with it is a signed, sealed letter. It's signed by witnesses. It's sealed with the seal of the King of India. lavna la trufos, and together with this, there's medications, right? Sheterapena oscha mimachlosacha, that will heal all of your illnesses. V'tishmarna al b'rusecha, and will keep you healthy. Ura alim lo'ivecha, and poisons that you can feed your enemies. V'nal'anilchamim bach, some kind of bioweapon that you can use against your enemies, right? Shetis ames itam bahem. You won't even need armies and ammunition to fight your enemies. Would then you accept to listen to him? In other words, if the king gives you something, heals your illnesses, helps you in your fights against your enemies, right? Helps make you healthy, helps make you strong. He does something for you. And with it comes the evidence that it's from him. Now will you say that he's a great king, right? Amra Kuzari, the Kuzari answers, now, yeah, sure. Now the doubt is removed. Hakodem, the doubt that I had before. First of all, before I didn't even know if they have a king. Now I know they have a king. And now I know that not only is there a king, but he's able to send me nice things and wonderful things, right? He's able to send messengers all the way here to Europe, right? So Amar Chaver, so the Chaver responds, this is item 23, so now if I asked you, how would you describe him? Would you say, oh, he's just a guy? Or would you say he's a great king, right? So Amar Kuzari 24, I will describe him with things that I know to be true based on what I've actually seen with my eyes. Right? And together with that, right, I would also the things that are well known to others. Now that I know that he's real, and now that I know that he's capable of doing the things, and he's sending things to me, and so that are incredible things. So now when I hear people say that there's the great king and they tell me another story, I'll say those stories too, right? Because they're clearly true based on these things that we were just discussing that just happened. So item 25, Amar Chaver, that's exactly what I answered when you asked me, right? Right? You asked me about my emunah, about my faith, right? Why is it that I know about God, right? Why is it that I believe that my path in life is the right path in life, the path of Judaism, right? It's because I know that this God has been with me and been with my people for so long, right? I know firsthand evidence that my parents told me and their parents told them and their parents told them all the way back. All these stories about our relationship with God and what he's done for us. That's why when God was being reintroduced to the Jewish people in Egypt after suffering under hundreds of years of slavery, and Moshe came to Paro and he says to Paro, Elohei ha'ivrim shalachani elecha. It was the God of the Hebrews, right? Why did he use that language? The God of the Hebrews, Kolomar. Elohei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yakov, shahaya inyanam mefursam bein ha'umos, right? Because everybody knows about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? V'shaliva osam davar Elohi, and that there was something special about them, something godly about them, right? V'zachul hashgacha, and they had the special providence of God. V'nasulem plaos, and wondrous things happened to them. Abraham came from a faraway nation as a nobody, and he became a wealthy, important, powerful leader in the new country, right? Same thing, Yitzchak and Yaakov, right? That Yaakov was thrown out, his son being chased by his brother. He comes back as a wealthy man and reestablishes himself as a major force to be reckoned with in the land of Canaan, right? Moshe didn't say to Paro, it is God of the heavens and the earth, right? He said, he didn't say it was my creator that sent me, but rather, he said it was the creator, it was the God who was with my forefathers, the God who established a relationship with me because of what he had did for my forefathers. And similarly, right, when God turned to the people of Israel and was trying to reintroduce himself because they almost had lost their knowledge of God and during the difficult years of slavery, He said, Ani Elohim shato veroso, asher hotzei sicham eretz Mitzrayim, right? And as God, I mean, and for forever on in history, God always refers to, when he comes to us, he says, I am the God who took you out of Egypt, right? V'lo amar ani borei olam u'vorachem, right? He doesn't say, I'm the creator of the world. He tells us what he did for us, right? V'chein pasachti es dvarai elecha, nesicha kuzarim. And that's why I began my words to you, king of the Khazars. Mekivan sheshalta osi al emunasi, you asked me about my faith. Anisi locha kafi shemutal alai, I answered that which is incumbent upon me to answer. V'al kahal b'nei Yisrael, and to the entire congregation of the children of Israel. Asher nisbarer Elohem amitus oso mare eina ayin. This is true to us because of what we see with our own eyes. And the tradition that is trustworthy, asher kamoa kamare ayin, which is just as good as our own eyes. So over here, what he's saying here, right, is that our obligation to live the life that God commands us to live, right, comes from the fact that we recognize and appreciate the special relationship that we have with him, the things that he does for us today, the things that he did for our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, and so on and so forth, all the way back to our earliest ancestors, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. A lot of people understand what the Kuzari is saying over here is that this is the proof, right, of God. If you look, even if you look at the AI chatbots, right, you'll see, and I checked this myself, they understand the Kuzari proof to be, right, a proof which is proving the correctness and of Judaism, and I'll get to the hands up in a minute, because we saw it with our own eyes and because we have a reliable tradition. Personally, I don't think that that's what the Kuzari is saying at all. Not that he's not saying that he does say that we have a reliable tradition that's as if we saw it with our own eyes. But I don't think the Kuzari is trying to prove the veracity of the miracles. First of all, the main reason why I say that is because in the time that he's arguing, in the context within which he's arguing, he's making his speech, not arguing. There is no argument or debate over the veracity of miracles. Everyone in the room believes in miracles. The Jew, the Muslim, the Christian, and the Kuzar himself, right? This isn't the Maimonides book where Maimonides tried to minimize miracles, right? This is a different book, right? Here, no one's arguing whether miracles happen. See, the Kuzari is not trying to prove miracles. He's trying to tell us, right, that our Masorah is as good as a proof that we're right, right? Because the Masorah itself is the reason why we do what we do, right? We live this life because we have a tradition and we have a relationship that developed between us and God over generation after generation after generation. That's why we live the way we live. That's the justification for Judaism. It's not a proof, but it's an explanation, right? It's an explanation that underlies what we do every day. Why is it that this practice is important and not that practice? Because this is what we've always done, right? And why do we do it this way? Because we're giving thanks to God. Why do we keep Pesach? Because within our lived experience of us and our ancestors is the freedom from Egypt. So we keep Pesach to celebrate that freedom that we attribute to God, right? And God gave to us. Why do we do all of the things that commemorate our relationship with the land of Israel? Because our ancestors lived the experience of getting that land from God, right? And so on and so forth. And every single thing, this is what the Kuzari, he's not talking about philosophical proofs. He's not trying. The reason why I say this is because if you go online, you'll also see that proof is not a proof. That doesn't mean, because it's not, that's not the point. People that speak that way are missing the point. And I can guarantee you can go look at other lectures and you'll see it being taught that way. And they're completely wrong. I'm just telling you they're wrong. I know they're wrong. But if you don't agree with me, that's fine. But this is the way we have to understand what the Kuzari is telling us. So Omar Kuzari, so the Kuzari says the obvious big clincher here. And some of you might be thinking this already. If that's true, I'm going to paraphrase, Imkach Torah eschem miyucheres lachem, then this special relationship is only for you guys, right? I'm here looking for what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm the king of the Khazars. What does it have to do with the Khazars, right? You guys have this great relationship with the God of your forefathers. What does it have to do with me, right? Why is the Torah is only for you, right? So so the Chaver, the Jew, is in a little bit of a bind over here. Remember, he's standing in front of the king of the Khazars, and he basically is saying that, yeah, God has to deal with us, and that's it. That's all that matters, right? So Amar Chaver says, okay, umos kifrat yikabel min haTorah shalanu. If somebody wants to join us, you're welcome, right? You can join us, right? You can become Jewish if you want, right? Ach lo yishtaveh imanu, but he won't be exactly the same as us. Now, this is one of the very controversial things that the Kuzari says, and it's different from most other Jewish authorities, right? The Kuzari seems to be treating a convert to Judaism as a stage less than a Jew, him or herself, a born Jew. It's a very important subject. There's tons and tons of scholarly articles written on it if you want to look out there. So, I'm not going to defend this position, but I have to read his position for the sake of intellectual honesty, right? That's the way that's what he writes. Yosef, you can go ahead.
Yeah, just before you continue to the next argument,
Right.
I'm very glad that you explained it the way you did about miracles versus just the emunah, because hypothetically speaking, if Esav or Ishmael wanted to claim that they also have a relationship and that they also are
Mhm.
followers of Abraham, they would have been able to, except for this Yetziat Mitzrayim part, and so
Yeah, that's true.
yeah,
Yep,
I
and
believe.
I think the thing for me though, I'm bringing it up again. The reason why I think it's so important for me to emphasize that is because it pulls the legs out from all of the because all the people that say that it's not a good proof, because scientifically, it's not right. Logically, you can, but when you understand that he's not actually proving, then then there's no you can't pull the leg out from under that. But yeah, you're right. Those would have been, good examples. They also had forefathers that had relationships with God, right? Another answer that the Kuzari could have given, I mean, not the Kuzari, that Rabbi Levi or in the mouth of the Chaver here could have given was maybe your nation has a special relationship with God that you could lie. You're the king of the Khazars. Look at your beautiful land, Khazaria, right? There must be nice mountains and rivers in Khazaria, and they must grow nice. I don't know, whatever they grow in Khazaria, right? But he didn't take that tact, right? He could have said, "Yeah, we have our special relationship, which obligates us to live this way, and you have your special relationship, whatever that relationship." But that's not the tact he took, right? He says, if you want to join us, right, you can. And you will also be part of us. You will also gain from this great benefit of being part of our nation, but you will never be the same. However, had the Torah been obligatory upon us because God is our creator, then all humans, both black and white humans, in other words, all humans all across the world would have been this equally, right? Um, Obligated in the same Torah. Kikulam bru avisala, where they're all created by God. We're all equally His creations. Avochiv Torah, but you're asking me about what leads to my specific way of life, the life that's guided by the Torah, right? The reason why our life is guided by the Torah and not everyone else's is because we had the special privilege of the exodus from Egypt. And God stuck with us because we are the choice, the skula, the chosen of all of the nations, right? So the Yehuda Levi is presenting an idea here also, which is a very important idea, right? And that is that God stays with us because we are the choicest, right? That's a very highly charged idea, but this is an idea that Rabbi Levi presents here. Okay. You can like it, you can not like it, you can debate it, you can say what you want, but that's what he presents. So Amar Kuzari. So the king says like this now, right? Ro'ani, I see Shata Hayudi, that you, Jew, hafachpech, right? You were saying good, we were making a lot of sense, and now you're not making sense again. What you're saying it sounds secretive. It sounds it's not easy to understand anymore, right? In other words, because remember, the Kuzari is under the assumption, the king of the Khazars is under the assumption that there is a right way to live, which would affect all humanity. Everyone should live, including me, Mr. King of Khazar, right? Right? So I should, and now you're trying to tell me that there is no right way. There's just a way that you guys live. And so I'm losing you. So Amar HaChaver. So the Chaver says back to him, Hachelek harozeh biyoser shebahem, right? Hu hashamein biyoser im tarchiv li libcha ad she'archiv liva aram, right? The one that's hardest for you to understand is really the most, razeh meaning thin, something that's very skinny and withered, right, as opposed to the fattest, the juiciest, right, of them. If you would just open your heart until I can continue to expand upon them and explain them a little more, the things that you least understand are actually the most precious and the most understandable. So Amar Kuzari, Emor Masha Torotze. Say what you want to say. Go ahead. I'm giving you permission, right? So I think I kind of want to stop here, even though I know I didn't go the full hour, but I want to open the floor for discussion, because this is the end of a certain thought that the Chaver introduced, and he's going to begin. Oh, maybe I can go a little bit farther, so we can start these new thoughts, and then I'll stop. So let me go a little bit farther. So Amar HaChaver, the Chaver says like this: B'tokef hadavar hativi mitchayvim hatizuna, right? And it's anything natural in this world needs to have food. It needs to have sustenance, hatzmicha, and then there are things that grow and sprout. Haholada, they have to give birth to other things. V'kochosein v'kol tunayan, right? Hatzemach u'balachayim, plants and live animals are misyachtim bezos, right? Right, they're similar in this matter, right? That they need sustenance, they need nutrients, and they give birth to others, right? Both plants and animals do that. Bishonim min adama, they're different though from earth, or min avanim, or stones, min amachzvim, min esiros, or the elements and so on, right? So Amar Kuzri, zem mishpat atzarach peret avul ames, right? This is, you might need to go into more details, but yeah, it's true. Yeah, I agree, right? That so there's levels. There's the elements, right, which then would have been thought of as the four elements: earth, water, wind, and fire, of which everything was assumed to have been made of the four elements. And then there's the stones and inanimate objects, and metals and stuff. And then there's plants, and then there's animals. So Amar HaChaver, l'chol balei chayim miyuchad hadavar hanafshi, right? And for each live animal, right, there is a something that it's special about its particular soul, its particular life, right? Because of what it does and what its function in its life, it has certain types of motions, ritzonos, certain types of desires and needs, midos ofi, it's ways of doing things, chushim chitzoniim, and external senses, upnimim, and inner senses, va'od, and other things. So each animal has specific traits and characteristics. So Amar Kuzri gam esos ein lishlo. The king says that it's hard to argue on that. I can't argue. That's true. So Amar HaChaver uvitokef hadavar hasichli, right? And when it comes to the mind, to the intellect, mityached ha'adam michal balei chayim, the human being is special among all balei chayim, among all living creatures. Mizem mitchayev tikun hamidos, tikun habayis, v'chein tikun hamadina. Because of that, the human being has things that other animals don't need. They have special character traits. We refine ourselves, right? We build houses. We build structures, architecture, which no other animal does. At least not to the extent that we do, and with the right tikkun habayis, or b'chein tikkun, we make nations, v'notzaros hanahagos hamdinios v'achukos hamdinios, and we make all kinds of local customs and local rules and laws and systems of justice, etc. So that's unique to human beings. So Amar Kuzari Avsamas, this is true too. Amar Chaver ve'ezu darge yesh me'alzos, what's above that? All right, so we're going up in levels now. So Amar Kuzari, Dargas HaChachamim HaGedolim. That is the great wise people, right? So there's people, and then there's very special wise people. So Omar HeChaver, so the Chaver said, Lo Heskavanti Ela Lidarga Hashona Mereosea Shoni Atzmusi, right? I don't want to know like levels within a species, like one's smarter, one's dumber, one's faster, one's slower. I want to know something that's inherently different about one versus the other, right? Like a plant is inherently different from a rock, right? And a human is inherently different from an animal. And now a lot of scientists today would disagree with that. It would just say we're just an animal that happens to have a more functioning, a higher functioning brain than most other animals. But regardless, that was the way it was looked upon then. And even today, if you look at the development of self-awareness and intellect as something unique to humans, so then the human would be on a different level. Right? If you're going to make these kinds of differentiations, right, then there would be no end. Shoni mikri. That's just a chance difference. That's not a different level, right? If I told you that this lion is faster than this lion, or this lion is stronger than that lion, well, yeah, and then this lion is a little bit more dark than that lion, and this lion has is a little better eyesight than that lion, and then there will be 800 bazillion levels. But we all know a lion is a lion, and a cow is a cow, and a human is a human. Those are different levels, right? That's something different. So Amar Kuzari, Ein Efo Darga Muchashim Achar Adam. Okay, fine. So you know what? There's nothing above a human. Okay, we're not going to be able to do this whole thought. It's just too much for us to get into this time. So the first, let me. I just want to I'm going to stop here. I'll do a quick review of that little intro. So next time we'll get right into the meat of the Chaver's argument, right? But first, I just want to review quickly, right? What the Chaver said that was different from the others, right? Number one, he established that that we keep the Torah because of our special relationship with God, right? We keep the Torah because God took us out of Egypt, gave us the land of Israel, and so on and so forth. This is the reason why our life is, we lead our lives the way we lead them. Not because of the fact that God is the creator, but because of the fact that God has a special relationship with us. That's the basic point. Now I'm going to open the floor. We have a few minutes to discuss. I'm especially interested if anyone has thoughts in comparison to how this differs from what the Rambam said. Remember, the Rambam told us at the end of the book, he had a whole section on why we do the mitzvos, right? And what was the thrust of all of the Rambam's ideas, right? It was because it made sense, because the mitzvos had a logical reason. Sometimes he says, I might not know what it is, but if we understood the historical circumstances, we would know the logical reason. The Kuzari is giving a very, very different argument. He's saying we keep the mitzvos because God has been treating us special for all of these years and has a special relationship with us, and therefore he told us to keep the Torah. Does that change? We can just think about that. Does that change how you approach, living as a Jew, right?
Well, all I can say, if I went to any of my Christian friends,
right,
they would say that's absurd. They'd say we've benefited. We have Jesus. God's been good to us. We've thrived, and I don't think I know they don't underwrite or subscribe to the idea that we've been special beneficiaries of God. They just don't.
I can't say what people would necessarily say. I think there's a good chance that you're right. At least a lot of people would answer like that. It is a flaw to this argument. That's why, I almost would have rather have had him answer the Kuzari, the king, the Khazar king, and say, we all have a special relationship with God, right? We all look at our lives and see the things that he gives us, right? And and for us, right, this is the Barry wrote me an email the other day. This is the covenant that we have with God, right? That we keep the Torah, right? And we have a special mission, right? Now you also might have such a mission, right? Um, but and we develop our relationship because and that happens in us in our personal lives too, right? Because I love the idea that the core idea of what Rabbi Levi is teaching us, right? In other words, it's about this relationship, even if whether or not what happened, what the miracles happened, whether you believe or not, it's not even that important. What's important is this bond that we've created with God and our understanding of God over thousands of years, and that's why we live the way we live. I find that to be a beautiful idea, but you're right. If you use this and say, but that may not be necessarily a bad thing. If someone else says, this is our relationship, I don't know. But
Well, and
yeah.
then they would go further. And frankly, between us, I have a daughter-in-law who's not Jewish, and she would say nonsense. She'd say, "I have a special relationship," and and it's completely it's impossible to persuade them with this argument, frankly.
All right. I hear you. Okay. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Barry. I see you have your hand up. No? Okay. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead.
We once had a senior rabbi at my congregation, Samuel Skolnick, Zichrono Livracha. He told us that he thought Jews, when they're young, should study the work of Paul of Tarsus, Saul,
Okay. Right.
who became Paul. And he said we should think about his drive to go out and create a universal religion. And what was he offering? He was offering a route to heaven, a route to the afterlife. That was the part of the message, I think, that would unite people. What would unite people is everyone is mortal. And if you want to be beyond mortal, you have to behave in such a way that you earn. So I don't know that the Christians were satisfied by this. They didn't want to have to earn it.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things they didn't want to have to do to earn it. When it came to the circumcision, as obeying Shabbat and a few other little things.
Yeah.
So,
People want an easy way out. I've always said that. People want to say, "I believe," and now I go to heaven, right?
But when Paul gave his lectures to the Romans and to the places where he went, Ephesus, other places throughout the Greek world, he put a lot of stress not only on the life of Jesus, but on the mitzvot. And at the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus told his people, "You have to know the law." Now let's talk about other things, but you have to start with knowing the law, and understand the meek will inherit the earth, and all that kind of thing that he talked about on the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
That's my limited knowledge of Christianity.
Yeah, well, I don't have a tremendous. All I know is whatever secondhand knowledge we hear all around. I mean, I have read the New Testament. It was a long time ago, so I certainly don't consider myself an expert. But yeah, I mean, I think I think we've exposed one of the flaws in this argument. But we're gonna have more chance to discuss this. And to be honest, I'm kind of processing this myself. I wanted to say this in the beginning, and that is that I want to teach and understand and appreciate what Rabbi Yehuda Levi has to offer. But I myself have always found, and this should come as no surprise to most of you, myself leaning much more towards the Maimonidean rationalist approach. But I want to make sure that when I give Rabbi Yehuda Levi his due and try to absorb what he's trying to teach us, and on thoughts like this, I do see flaws, in this argument, just like you mentioned before, Jeffrey, that it's like you know, the Kuzari's question was a very good question. Okay, so that explains why you Jews have this relationship, but what does that mean to me? What does that mean to everyone else on this planet? So we'll see in a minute how Rita Levi addresses that. We started. You may be getting a little hint as to where he's going, but before you decide, well, you're always free to read ahead if you want. But let's let Rita Levi have a chance to give us the argument as to the answer to that question. Because one of his first quick answers, yeah, you can join us if you want, you know. No, but what if you don't want to join us? What now? Now what are the right actions that I'm supposed to do? You know, and that's a good question. You know, so we'll see where he goes with this, and and so we'll continue from item number 41. Is it? I think. Yeah, number 41. That's where we're up to, and we'll continue from there next week.
Well,
All right.
40.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. All right. Well, anyway, I have we still have time before Rosh Hashanah. So next week we still have a class. All right.
Are you having a Lisato class next week?
Yes. For those that come to the Ramchal, the Mesilat Yesharim class, it was supposed to be last night, but because they had a big event here in Birmingham that a lot of my attendees wanted to go to, so we pushed it off to next week, the 16th. And then we're going to take a break for the Mesilat Yesharim class till after Sukkot. So, but yeah, next week, Tuesday night, we'll have that class too. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. Yeah. Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.